go recognize somebody else.
Mhm.
Because when you give, you always receive. And this idea of just pulling somebody aside or calling them out in a meeting or dropping them a text or a little handwritten note that says, hey, I just want you to know how much I appreciate the work you do here. I know it's been a rough spot. We've been understaffed. You've pulled some long hours. It's time away from your family. It doesn't go unnoticed. We get to do what we do because you show up every day.
Hi, my name is Randy Hain, and I am the co-founder of the Leadership Foundry and the co-host today for our podcast with best-selling author Chester Elton. And I want to just tell you, you're in for a great show today. Chester talks about gratitude, anxiety, and just some wonderful, wonderful best practices that all of us can use to be better professionals, better leaders, and quite frankly, better people. Brandon and I are hopeful that you'll tune in.
This is the Leadership Foundry podcast. I'm your co-host today, Brandon Smith. I'm joined by my co-host, Randy Hain. Randy, good to have you with me today, brother.
Excited to be with you, my friend.
Yeah, excited. And most importantly, our guest today is the amazing, talented, decorated author, Chester Elton. Chester, so excited to have you with us today, my friend.
So thanks for the invite, Brandon. And, Randy and I have been friends for a long time. Whenever he calls and says, hey, do you want to do something with me? The answer is always yes. So delighted to be here.
Chester, and I've followed your work for many, many years, and you really do spend so much time on trying to make workplaces generally just healthier and good places for human beings to flourish and thrive in. And you've written on so many topics. And so where I'd like us to start our conversation today is on something that we just aren't seeing as much of as we'd like. And that is appreciation and gratitude in the workplace. Since the pandemic, it just seems like so many companies and so many leaders are so fixated on the transformation initiatives and things that are urgent that they're trying to put in place and figuring out where people are going to be or working, but they're not spending a whole lot of time on appreciating folks. So would love to get your thoughts on not only why that's an issue, but when you think about the importance of appreciation and gratitude at work, why is this even important? Why are we even talking about this today?
Yeah, well, Brandon, this is kind of my sweet spot, as you might say. This is a soft pitch right down the middle. It's really interesting. Adrian Gostick is my co-author, and we've been writing on workplace culture, leadership teams, and whatnot for over 2 decades now. And we keep asking the question, what makes for a highly engaged, productive, innovative, all those boxes you want to check, cultures and leaders. We call it an all-in culture, right? Where I don't have to go to work, I get to go to work. And that's what you're really looking for. And what was fascinating, now, Brandon, we've done we have access in a database to over 1 million engagement surveys over the years, right? Countless interviews. We've written several books on the subject. The common thread in the excellence category in every one of those groups was gratitude. Isn't it fascinating? So you're saying, we're not getting enough of it. Why is it so hard to do? And yet the very best in class companies, the very best in class leaders do it. And we define it in a very simple way. We say, look, a culture where people believe what they do matters, right? I believe that there's a noble cause. My mission, vision, values, they line up. What I do every day, I can connect those dots. So I believe what I do matters and I make a difference. And then the key to that is at the end, where we say, and when they make a difference, it's noticed and it's celebrated. Mm-hmm. So the thing I want to get to your listeners right away is when you talk about subjects like gratitude and recognition and appreciation, people go, yeah. Soft stuff. I get it. Nice to have, not a must have. A soft skill, not a hard skill. All the data we have, and it's voluminous, right? Is that not only is it not a soft skill, it's absolutely a hard skill because it's people and people are hard, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not a nice to have, it's an absolute must have for a lot of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. But where I'd love to kick off the conversation is why it's more important now than ever is because of the rising levels of mental health and anxiety in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Now, why do you think I would start there? And Randy, I'm going to throw this to you. Why would I say that gratitude, recognition, and praise is a great connection to mental health in the workplace. How does that connect?
Well, you and I've talked about this in the past, but I think it's always interesting to understand what are the obstacles that keep us from doing something that we all agree is important. We all agree that gratitude is a good thing. You won't find anybody that doesn't like the idea of it, but what keeps us from doing it? So I think to your point, anxiety, stress, high burnout levels may be those factors that are keeping us from doing it. That's my take.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. So after we wrote our book, Leading with Gratitude, the pandemic hit. By the way, don't ever launch a book 2 weeks before a global pandemic.
Noted.
So anyway, Adrian's son came to us, and I've known Anthony since he was 6 years old. Came to us and said, this is now things are kind of wrapping up. It's near the end of 2022, and said, do you guys ever talk about mental health in the workplace? You talk about culture, you talk about gratitude. And of course, Adrian's Gen X, I'm the tail end of baby boomers. We looked at him and went, no, what are you talking about? Our generation has rubbed some dirt on it, get back in the game, turn that frown upside down. Just relax, calm down. My favorite quote is, never in the history of calming down has anybody ever calmed down by being told to calm down. That doesn't work with your kids. Calm down. The yelling, I think, helps. What we looked at is the reasons why anxiety was so high. And it was uncertainty, right? It was overload. It was burnout. It was perfectionism, feeling like an other in the workplace, and on and on and on. So when we looked for strategies on how to deal with that, and we came up with 8 that would work in the workplace really well. The 8th strategy was gratitude. You can't hold 2 emotions at the same time. You can't be anxious and grateful at the same time. So while we'll take a deeper dive on how do we do it and how do we create rituals and tokens and so on so that it becomes a part of our culture, let's start with the fact that one of the things you can do to really mitigate anxiety and burnout in the workplace. And by the way, Robert Half came out this year and said 91% of employees are somewhat, or if not totally burned out, is simple, non-cost, and frequent expressions of gratitude, that I feel valued, that what I did was important. I believe what I do matters. I made a difference and somebody noticed it and celebrated it. So just to put it in the context that this isn't soft, fluffy stuff. This is what best-in-class leaders do. Mm-hmm. They lead their people, they engage their people, they value their people, and they show that value and they express it through simple acts of gratitude.
So Chester, I want to build on this for a minute. I had on our podcast, this was some months ago, I had a therapist come on and we were talking about how to manage just in today's world with everything going on. And she really spent some time on the word ruminating and rumination, and said we spend too much time ruminating and that just builds anxiety and everything else. And it's easy to ruminate, I've noticed, when I'm working at home, out of my home office, and it's just me all by myself. It's easy to just get kind of wound up. And so part of this feels like we're losing, or we've lost connection with others. We're feeling alone, we're feeling isolated. So I would love to get your thoughts on how do we do this gratitude, appreciation, and does it look different if we're back to work in an in-person setting or a hybrid setting versus we've got virtual team members and they're all over the place? How do we make them feel appreciated and feel that sense of gratitude when, we're typically just doing, meeting after meeting after meeting, it's virtual, but we're not having lunch with them. We're not bumping into them in the hallway. So what looks different and can we make it as successful in virtual environments?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes, you can. And it's a discipline like anything else, right? And it is so interesting that you mentioned this isolation and rumination. We often say to friends that are suffering or regrets and you say, you're spending way too much time with yourself. Go spend time with somebody else, And I'm a big believer in that. I'll tell you, I read a revelatory book that I'd love to share with you and your listeners. Over and above all the books we've written, buy all those ones first, right? But the point is, and my publisher makes me say that. The point is I read a book called The Good Life by Robert Waldinger, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this book, but He's the director of the human longevity study at the Harvard School of Business, Harvard, not Harvard School of Business, just Harvard. It's a study that's been going on for 85 years. And they started in the 1930s to say what creates a long, happy, and healthy life. And Bob is part of our leadership group. And so I was first introduced to him there. And then he's got a wonderful TEDx talk. You should look him up. And he published last year this book called The Good Life. So they've got hundreds and thousands of data points. They followed these about 650 young men from Harvard and from the poorest neighborhoods in Boston. They combined these two studies, and they would interview them every year, and their kids and their wives and now their grandkids and their great grandkids. And if I were to ask you, so hundreds of thousands of data points, what do you think was the biggest determining factor for a long, happy, and healthy, right? Long, happy, and healthy life. If you had to pinpoint one thing, what might that be?
Friendships, marriage, relationships.
I'm a relationship guy. I would say relationships.
Yeah, spot on. Deep and meaningful relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, good genes and healthy eating and all that, it's really good. Relationships are better. Married people tend to be happier than unmarried people. People that go to church tend to be happier than people that don't go to church. People that volunteer tend to be happier than people that don't volunteer. By the way, on the church thing, Randy and I are both men of faith. And what was funny is he said, and it doesn't matter what church. He goes, it doesn't mean Catholics are happier than Baptists or Buddhists, because there's a community. So back to your question about hybrid and in person and stuff. Where's the community? Now, I asked Bob, who's a ridiculously happy guy, by the way. Not only is he's Jewish by tradition and a psychologist, psychiatrist, and a wonderful teacher, he's also a Zen Buddhist monk. I said, as if you weren't cool enough already, a Zen Buddhist priest, really? I mean, come on. Anyway, I said, so how do you do it? Your question, how do you do it? He said, look at your calendar every week and say, who haven't I talked to lately? Who should I drop a note to? Who am I having breakfast with, lunch, and dinner? Who are we inviting over to the house? And I took him up on it. And I'll tell you, I've had great, I live in New Jersey, so there's diners here. You know what I'm saying? There's places, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a diner. You know what I'm saying? And they're open 24/7. You can get, an omelet any time of day or French toast, which is better. And the idea is when you sit down and you eat with somebody, when you sit down and you spend time with somebody, he said, you'll wake up in the morning and somebody's name will come into your head. Just text them. Hey, I was just thinking about you. I hope everything's going okay. Give me a call if you want. To be remembered that somebody thought about you. Now, I took that one a little to the sort of crazy level. I started to text a dear friend of mine. I just was with him in Phoenix, actually. He's a distant cousin. We went to university together, and he's had all these strokes, and he's been bedridden for, almost 2 years now. And whenever I get a chance, I'd sit with Doug. Well, I would text him every morning with just a happy thought. And I made the mistake of telling people I did that. I now text 65 people every morning. Now, I know there's probably a group text app, and I should learn how to use that. And yet, I love just their names coming into my head every day. Mm-hmm. And it takes 15 minutes, right? We can all find 15 minutes. But this idea of a discipline of who needs just a quick shout out, so back in the business, am I spending time with my remote people? And it's not always checking up on the assignment and the project and whatever. It's just dropping in and saying, hey, I was wondering if we could, grab a coffee and let's just chat a little bit about stuff. I'm really interested to know what you think about whatever. Mm-hmm. The other thing, Brandon, that we've discovered, and I found to be very true, is to make those connections, you need to know stuff. And I find that as a leader, if you know the answer to these 4 basic questions, relationships get deeper very quickly. And that is, where did you come from? Mm-hmm. I came from Canada. Odds are I'm going to be a rabid hockey fan and love maple syrup. I mean, that's a given. And because I'm Canadian, I'm just going to be super nice. So where did you come from, right? How did you get here? How did you end up in Atlanta? How did you end up at this company, right? How did you end up at Vanderbilt? Whatever, right? What do you want to accomplish while you're here? So what are your goals? Mm-hmm. Do you want to progress? Do you want to learn this? Do you want to learn that? And then the last one, which I think is really helpful for leaders, and where do you want to go from here? Right? Where did you come from? How did you get here? What do you want to accomplish while you're here? Where do you want to go from here? Boy, I'll tell you, if you know the answer to those questions, you can put people in a situation to succeed pretty quickly and you understand their background. Quick example, I had this young guy working for me, clearly Asian. And I said, so, where do you come from in Asia? And he says, well, I come from South Carolina. I said, yeah, no, I get that part. But, your heritage, where do you come from? He said, Vietnam. I said, oh, that's really interesting. I know a lot of people from Asia. I don't know anybody from Vietnam. Tell me your story. He says, well, I was born quite late. My parents were boat people. Do you know the story of boat people from Vietnam? Yeah, Randy, and they say, look, I'm a boat person. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands, maybe or close to 1 million refugees left the country, and they lived on boats, and they were looking for countries to accept them in. And it's a great story, and so many of them have gone on to just have great success in this country because we accepted them in, and they thrived.
Yeah, he said, my parents literally, when the collapse of Saigon, ran down to the water, found a dinghy, jumped in, and just rowed out to sea.
Yeah.
And the American sailors scooped them up.
Yeah.
Now, had they not, they would have died. I mean, the South Asia seas are not particularly calm, right? And knowing that one thing about him, I understood why education was so important, why he was just such a hard worker, why family was so important.
Mm-hmm.
I would have never known had I not asked him.
Yes.
So, leaders, just look at your calendar and are we spending time? Now, last thing, and I'm really passionate about this. I think there's something magical about meals. When you eat together, you break bread, whatever, there's something magical about that. Cornell did a really cool study on firefighters and their firehouses. By the way, the collective noun for firefighters is a platoon, an army of ants, a murder of crows, a platoon of firefighters, right? And they said, what were the characteristics of the best firehouses? Fastest response times, better survival, fewer injuries, and so on. Number one was they ate together. They ate breakfast, they ate lunch. Said when we came into a firehouse, if they ate alone, we knew there was serious problems. Mm-hmm. And you think about it, and this is why I'm a fan of, even if you're a remote employee, find ways to get into the workplace, whether it's once a week or once a month or whatever your routine is. Because, you and I were having this great conversation. It's two senses. It's sight and sound. And that's great. Sight and sound. It used to be just sound, right? We were just on the phone. When you eat with somebody, it's all five senses. It's sight, it's sound, it's touch, it's taste. It's so interesting to me when you engage those five senses and when you feed somebody and you sustain them. To me, it's a very spiritual experience. When you invite someone in your home and you feed them, that's a sacred moment. And so you build relationships and you talk about stuff at lunch that you don't talk about in a Zoom call. How are the Braves doing? And, who's your team? Or, you find out people are opera fans. That's very rare, by the way, that you find somebody who's an opera fan, but it can happen. Where do you think? Yeah, it could happen. Where do you travel? Where do you like to vacation? How are your kids doing?
One of my favorite questions with a stranger, Chester, if I meet someone for the first time, hey, can we just talk about life outside of work for a couple of minutes? Tell me about life outside of work. Because people are so geared to jump into the business topic of the day, it throws them off. But once they get into it and they share, then you can share. And all of a sudden you're halfway through your meal and you've had this amazing discussion about life outside of work.
Yeah. And I think, the two things that are always safe to talk about are religion and politics.
And money. Yes. And money. We should throw in money. That's the third.
Yeah.
Actually, it was really interesting. I travel a lot. We speak at conferences all over the place. And a friend of mine said, there's two things that are safe to talk about always, and that's family and food. Everybody wants to talk about their family, and no matter where you are in the world, they're proud of their food. And so those are easy ways to start the conversation.
Chester, I want to take you back to one of your favorite books of mine, which was 2021's Anxiety at Work. This came out right after, we were kind of still in the middle of COVID, as you well know, and you talk so eloquently about anxiety at work and the struggles that we deal with. Well, we're 3 years later. This book is still just as relevant. I share it with my clients all the time, but I want to give you something to comment on. I wrote a post recently called "The Things I've Learned from Being an Expert at Only One Thing." And I talked about Malcolm Gladwell's book on outliers and the 10,000 hours of dedicated practice. And I made it pretty clear I'm not really an expert at anything except walking. I take long walks. And what I learned from my long walks is really the point of the blog post, all the great fruit in my life. But the intro to those best practices were I talked about when I go walking, I don't listen to anything. I have no music, no podcast. I am thinking, praying, and reflecting. And in that stillness, in that reflection, that rumination, I get so much great fruit. The reason I share that with you, I got so many emails from people that I know, some people that I don't know about that post. And they said, what you said sounds great in theory. I have no idea how to do that. It blows my mind that I could actually be quiet and still. And these are all people that I happen to know are fairly anxious and stressed, and they're burning out at work. But the idea that they could be still and peaceful and find fruit in that, that's how I've tried to live my life for years, Brandon, too. I know you believe in that. But talk a little bit about the need for just stillness and peace and prayer and reflection in order to be less anxious and show up better at work. I'd love to get your take on that.
It's such an excellent ritual that you have. And I'm a huge fan of tokens and rituals, and this idea of a daily walk. It's so interesting. So we have a podcast as well, Anxiety at Work, kind of on the nose, right? And we ask people all the time, how do you keep yourself in a good state of mind? How do you reduce your anxiety? And it's almost always there is movement, right? I go for a walk, I exercise, I run, right? There's almost always a meditation piece. Now, it's not always maybe sitting in the lotus position and so on. It's what you're talking about. It's that quiet time, that stillness. Go for a walk. The Japanese have a tradition called forest bathing. And I love this concept. We have a little place in upstate New York, and there's trails everywhere. And there's no cell phone coverage, which is great, right? And the idea that you just go for a walk in the woods and you commune with nature. Mm-hmm. And there's that quiet, and there's that stillness, and there's that beauty that just wraps itself around you. We have a dock at our place, and it faces east, and the sunrises are spectacular. And at night, there's no light pollution. You can see the stars. The Milky Way is at the tip of your nose. You can see the satellites go by. I mean, it's just, it's creation, right? I always joke with my friends that in the Christian tradition, when God speaks to his prophets, he sends them to the mountains. And when you go up in the mountains, you go, well, of course he does. I mean, it's incredible up here. If you can't get away, and most of us can't, that idea of just a daily walk around the neighborhood, and to your point, quiet. We had a woman on our podcast. Her name escapes me right now. I said, what do you do? She says, I move, I meditate, and I journal. Mm-hmm. And, of all the things that people tell us all the time, I think that encapsulated it really well. Get out and exercise, breathe outside air, get your body moving. 10,000 steps is a good goal. And then this idea of just quiet prayer and reflection, or just quiet. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite scriptures, be still and know that I am God. It's just such a great mantra for life, And then journal, this idea of reflection. I have a closet full of journals that my kids will never read, and that's okay. Although I have told them that I've stuck money in some of the pages. So maybe they'll go treasure hunting. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Mine is orange, shocker.
I'm shocked.
Yeah. And this idea of just simple reflection. Now, one of the things that we just did, and I'm so glad we're on the subject of reflection, is I'd kept gratitude journals for quite some time, over and above my regular journal. And just simple things. How do you start your day? How do you end your day? My wife and I have a tradition. What are your three at the end of the day? 3 things you're grateful for. And, studies have shown you end the day in gratitude, you end the day in prayer, you sleep better, it calms your mind and heart. And I called Adrian and I said, this is insane. I've been buying all these gratitude journals. We're the apostles of appreciation, the gurus of gratitude, the Dalai Lamas of workplace traumas. Why do we not have a gratitude journal? So we do. We just published it recently, and it's a 90-day journal. Just how do you start? How do you end your day? Huge fan of incorporate it as a ritual. Start your day in prayer, end your day in prayer, start your day in gratitude, end your day in gratitude, go for a walk. And Randy, you know this. You're the most disciplined guy I know. It's a discipline. You can't make time. Everybody gets the same amount of time. You have to find the time
Mhm.
and make it part of your daily routine. When I'm traveling and whatnot, and I don't get in my walk, I feel it.
Yes.
And I know you do too. Things happen, right? You know, flights are delayed. You get in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden your morning walk disappears. And all of a sudden you go, I'm just off today. And you go for a walk.
And what's interesting, if we can get people to embrace the basics, by the way, I'll never ever forget the Dalai Lama of workplace trauma. That is in my brain forever. Love it. But, the 3 points about, move, meditate, and journal. Love that. But if we can get people to even take another step, which is to consider the richness and the fruit that you will distill from those actions. It's not enough just to do the activities, because everybody can start a new activity, but if you'll start to get your head around the fruit of it, and that is where you see people really grow. And I love to see that in other people.
Yeah.
Spot on. The other thing is we're talking about gratitude and personal rituals. There's no question, and we do a lot of executive coaching. And one of the things I love to challenge coaches to is get up and give gratitude. Give. What did your mom teach you when you were 5 years old? Remember to say please and thank you. Leave the place better than you found it. Don't push, don't hit, don't bite. Still good advice.
Mhm.
Also, it's better to give than to receive.
Mhm.
And I always say, look, you want to brighten your day, go recognize somebody else.
Mhm.
Because when you give, you always receive. And this idea of just pulling somebody aside or calling them out in a meeting or dropping them a text or a little handwritten note that says, hey, I just want you to know how much I appreciate the work you do here.
Yes.
I know it's been a rough spot. We've been understaffed. You've pulled some long hours. It's time away from your family. It doesn't go unnoticed. We get to do what we do because you show up every day.
So, Chester, as you've been talking, where my mind has been going, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, it's that urgent versus important matrix called the Eisenhower Matrix, the Stephen Covey Matrix. And so most leaders today are just fixated on that urgent and important box. And they think that's all they need to be spending time on. And there's another box, the box that's actually the top right box, which is low urgency but high importance. And that is everything you're talking about today. Everything you're talking about is of the highest importance. But no one would say, well, gosh, a walk is urgent or meditation is urgent. Not really, but the fruit of it, as Randy keeps saying, is so critical. And even just giving people appreciation. And so, when we encounter times in our life or people that don't have peace, it's because they're so fixated on that urgent and important box, which is an anxiety producing box. I mean, that's where workplace anxiety lives, is there. So that's my setup. We ask all of our folks that we interview on the Leadership Foundry podcast, all of our guests, we ask this question: what is one practical thing that leaders can start doing today or tomorrow to really, really make this shift? So how do we take some of this and turn it practical? What are some disciplines or practices or anything else we can even put in our calendar that might move us into that important but not urgent box?
I love this question. I'm going to give you 3 rituals that pick one. The first one is we interviewed a really cool guy down in Dallas, Texas named Carlos Aguilera. And he has a gratitude ritual. And it's this: he puts 10 pennies in his left pocket. And he sets a goal to have 10 positive interactions with his people every day. A
Mhm.
note, a little. And the way he keeps track is he moves a penny from his left pocket to his right pocket. It's just a great little ritual, a little reminder. We were interviewing him for our book and we were having lunch and he goes, hey, give me a minute. It's lunchtime. I've still got 8 pennies in my left pocket. I'm way behind schedule. And I thought, again, a discipline, simple little ritual. Another one, and this you can do whenever. I am a huge fan of a very old school practice, and it's this: a handwritten note. And I know that it's easier to text. And I'm not saying you shouldn't text or email and do all that stuff or the Slack channel, whatever you do. There's something magical about a handwritten note, even more so now than before, because nobody does it anymore. And that little note shows up. It's so funny. I actually had a printer put this together for me. It's really it's just a simple little card. It says thank you in a bunch of different languages. Of course, it's orange on the back. And it's a bright orange envelope. And so people know when it shows up. And I had this ritual with my kids. By the way, don't just keep this in workplace. When I had two boys that were off out west at school, and I had a ritual every Sunday night. I'd write them a letter just from their dad. I'd write them every week, and they'd write me back about every 6 or 8 weeks. It wasn't one-to-one. And my son Brendan wrote me back one time, and this really drove it home for me. He said, Dad, I don't tell you how much I appreciate your weekly letters as often as I should. He says, but I want to let you know when that orange envelope shows up in the mail, I know it's from you. Mm-hmm. And then he said, and by the way, I don't always read it right away. He said, sometimes I'll wait till I'm having a tough day. Mm. And then I read it because I know after I read a letter from my dad, I'm going to feel better about myself. Mm. Changed my will. He's getting everything. So the point is a handwritten note is always timely because people see it and they find the time to do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now the last one, and this is really fun. And this is my own personal ritual. I have a goal to perform a random act of kindness every day, to lift up a stranger. And I found this really cool product on Amazon. You can order them by the hundreds. And they're gratitude stones. You can get stones that say different things, love and peace and happiness and whatever. Mine says gratitude. I have I know I've given well over 1,000 of these stones away. And I put 2 or 3 of them in my pocket every day. And I'll give it to the crossing guard. I'll give it to the policeman who's getting us across the street safely to the hockey game. You want to have the world's greatest service on any airline you ever take? Give the flight attendant at the beginning of the flight. Hey, I'm telling you. And we do this. My wife was with me all the time. We'll go to a restaurant. We'll have a great server. And I'll say, hey, by the way, you just made this so much fun for us. We were at an Irish pub in New York. And she had that lovely Irish accent, don't you know? And I said, oh, it's just such a wee, wonderful thing there, Made it so much fun for us. I said, I've got a little gift for you. It's a little good luck gratitude stone. She goes, for me? I said, yeah. And I said, there's a story behind it. The stones are all different and they're all flawed, like we are. But you throw a stone in a pond and the water ripples, just like gratitude. Just want to know how grateful we are for you. And they hold it. It's just, you're going to make me cry. And my wife always says, you gave her a rock. But of course, it's more than a rock, right? It's a token. It's a symbol. And I was doing a friend's podcast just the other day. He's in London, and I was over there, and I gave him a gratitude stone. He's a terribly anxious guy, very successful and anxious. He says, I never leave the house without 3 things: my phone, my wallet, my gratitude stone. So there's 3 things: a gratitude stone, a gratitude ritual, right? 10 pennies in your pocket, handwritten notes. Start doing it. I'll tell you, it's so personally affirming to give appreciation, a little bit of love, a little bit of gratitude. We're starving for it. Mm-hmm. But you can never get enough. I talked about people, can you get too much gratitude? They go, well, yeah, it loses its meaning. I go, no, it doesn't. If you're madly in love, how many times do you tell your wife you love her? It could be multiple times a day. Does it ever get old? Never gets old. Because you mean it, right? Yeah. And that's my sermon, and I'm sticking to it. Can I get an amen?
Amen. Chester, this has been absolutely great. So before we let you go, is there either projects you're working on or anything else that you would want to let our listeners know about?
And how can they follow you? And how can they follow you? How can they stay in touch with you? All that. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, the project I'm working on, and you guys should really help me with this. I'm trying to figure out how to get just every American adult, just one time a month, send me $1. Just $1 1 month.
Hey, we've got the same project.
It would really help me out. Just share it with your friends. Anyway, of course, I'm kidding. But the way to follow us, and we've got lots of fun stuff. Our books are available everywhere. But go to LinkedIn and follow us. We have a wonderful little twice a month we probably publish the Gratitude Journal, and we're so gratified. We have 320,000 subscribers, which is lovely, and we just share stories like this. And we love to promote friends that are doing good works as well. We have a podcast, Anxiety at Work. Our website is thecultureworks.com, and we've got all kinds of fun stuff there. Projects that we're working on, I will tell you, we talked about this right before we went on air. Treat yourself to thepowerofkind.org. It's such an interesting, it's a little charity. They put me on their advisory board, obviously, my donation. Their belief is one kind act a day will change the world. Thepowerofkind.org. And you take this pledge, they don't ask for any money. In fact, they won't accept any money. Just take a look at it and set a goal to do one kind act a day. And if we all did one kind act a day, I believe we can change the world. The world is starving for kindness, and we can be that agent of change. We can be that agent of kind. I know we can.
Love it.
Chester, thank you for your time. Thank you for all the great work that you've been putting out over the many, many years, and the great work you continue to do to help make our lives better. I and we are so grateful for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your friendship, my friend. Take care.
You bet. And listen, anytime you want me back or anything I can do anything for you, I love good people that are doing good things. And that's you too. I'm grateful for our friendship. I'm grateful for this work that you're doing. Have a great day.
Take care.
Thanks, Chester.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye. What a great show we just had with best-selling author Chester Elton. My co-host Brandon Smith and I had a wonderful conversation. We unpacked so many great things about gratitude and anxiety and showing up as better leaders. There were 3 takeaways that I got from this that I want to share with you that I think you'll also see in the podcast. The first is, let's be good humans. Let's be better humans, treat each other better, deal with each other with kindness and generosity and gratitude. Love that. Second takeaway that I got from today was the power of ritual. Chester shares so many best practices and rituals in this podcast. You will walk away absolutely equipped to do a better job in all areas of your life. And then the third thing that I got from today was that each of us can make a difference in the world. Don't wait for someone else. Don't wait to join a club or a group or an organization. You and I can make a difference wherever we are. So those are my takeaways. I think Brandon would agree with me. And one of the things that Brandon shared, he wasn't able to do the end of this with me, but he thinks that everybody that watches this is going to be a better leader and a better human being. I agree.